the Aryan Brotherhood, a name that strikes fear and respect, a secretive and ruthless group that has thrived in the shadows of America's prison system for decades. Known for their extreme loyalty, calculated violence, and organized operations, the Aryan Brotherhood is not just a gang, it's a symbol of power. But who are the people behind this notorious gang? What makes them some of the most dangerous individuals in the world? In this video, we dive deep into the lives of the most feared members of the original Aryan Brotherhood, starting with the men who built its reputation from the ground up. These were not ordinary criminals. They were masterminds, individuals whose influence stretched beyond the prison walls, men whose names are etched into the history of gang warfare and prison power struggles. From the quiet leaders pulling the strings in maximum security to the figures whose violent action shook entire communities. This is part 1 of our series on the most dangerous members of the Aryan Brotherhood. Number 10. Daniel Troxell. Daniel "Danny" Troxell is a convicted member of the notorious Aryan Brotherhood, AB. Troxell, who is now in his 70s, has been part of the gang for decades and rose to a position of significant power within the organization. His involvement in the AB has been marked by his role in directing illicit activities, including orchestrating violent incidents and overseeing a wide-ranging network for trafficking illicit substances. Members like Troxell, who reach leadership positions, have substantial influence over the gang's operations, which include managing illicit substance distribution, issuing commands for violent acts, and maintaining control over both inmates and those connected to the gang outside prison walls. Troxell's rise through the ranks of the Aryan Brotherhood came with numerous violent acts that cemented his reputation as a dangerous figure. He was involved in managing the affairs of the gang from within California's most secure prison facilities, even using smuggled cell phones to communicate with other gang members and orchestrate operations. These communications were not limited to prison matters. They extended to directing the trafficking of illicit substances across states, from California to other parts of the country, including Las Vegas and Missouri. One of the most significant events in Troxell's criminal history was his involvement in the conspiracy to harm individuals who fell out of favor with the gang. This included involvement in the planning and coordination of violent events carried out to maintain discipline and control within the organization. As a leader, Troxell had the authority to approve the execution of members or associates who violated the gang's code or who were seen as liabilities. Troxell's criminal activities were not limited to in-prison affairs. The Aryan Brotherhood, under his influence, coordinated with outside individuals and gangs to smuggle illicit substances and weapons, further fueling its criminal operations. The AB had a partnership with the Mexican Mafia, which allowed the gang to expand its reach and increase its profits. This partnership facilitated the distribution of drugs, including methamphetamine and other illicit substances, into various communities, making the gang even more dangerous. Troxell's involvement in the demise of fellow inmates has been well documented, with his leadership role making him central to orchestrating these actions from behind prison walls. A key example is his connection to the termination of Hugo Pinell, a former leader of a rival gang, which led to a violent riot and further solidified Troxell's position within the AB. Pinell's demise was ordered by members of the Aryan Brotherhood, and Troxell's involvement in approving such an act showcases the ruthless nature of his leadership. In 2024, Troxell was convicted as part of a large-scale racketeering case that targeted the leadership of the Aryan Brotherhood. He was found guilty of conspiracy to conduct the affairs of the enterprise through a pattern of racketeering, which included violent acts and the trafficking of illicit substances. His conviction came after a lengthy investigation into the AB's operations, including the use of cell phones to manage their criminal activities. Despite multiple convictions and a life sentence, Troxell continues to be a key figure in the criminal underworld of California's prison system. Number 9. Ronald Yandel. Ronald Yandel, a prominent figure in the Aryan Brotherhood, AB, is widely recognized for his leadership role in the violent and illegal operations orchestrated by this notorious prison gang. His history is deeply entangled with violent crimes, including orchestrating deadly actions and overseeing a large-scale operation involving illicit substances. Yandel's rise to power within the Aryan Brotherhood, known for its ruthless tactics and strategic control over criminal activities in the prison system, marks him as one of the most dangerous individuals in the gang's history. Yandel was incarcerated at California State Prison Sacramento, where he, alongside fellow AB members, ran a significant illicit substance trafficking operation. The AB, which controls much of the criminal activity in California's prisons, uses smuggled cell phones to bypass surveillance and maintain connections with the outside world. Yandel was implicated in this operation, where he coordinated the distribution of illicit substances, including methamphetamine and heroin, both inside and outside of the prison walls. His ability to manage this operation from behind bars, while being held in high-security confinement, demonstrated his power and influence within the gang. During his time in the gang, Yandel was known for his involvement in planning and approving severe actions against those who violated the gang's codes or were deemed to be a threat. His hands were directly tied to multiple violent episodes. Yandel's gang was implicated in a series of violent confrontations, and he played a central role in ordering severe retribution. This included the conspiracy to target individuals who had crossed the AB, either through betrayal or disobedience. He wielded significant authority, often signing off on the fate of gang members or rivals who were considered obstacles to the gang's control. The tipping point in Yandel's criminal career came when federal authorities intensified their investigations into the AB's operations. The long-running probe culminated in Yandel's indictment in 2019 on a host of charges related to racketeering activities. His indictment included charges for directing the activities of the gang, orchestrating conspiracies to carry out violent acts, and overseeing the trafficking of illicit substances. In 2024, following a 9-week trial, Yandel was convicted of a series of crimes, including conspiracy and racketeering. The jury found that Yandel had actively participated in these criminal schemes from behind bars. Among the criminal activities attributed to him was his role in the demise of Hugo Pinel, a fellow inmate. Yandel was found guilty of conspiring to bring about the demise of several individuals as part of a calculated effort to maintain control over the gang's operations. In addition to these acts, Yandel was also found guilty of participating in an expansive illicit substance distribution network, which spanned across multiple counties and states. Number 8. Edgar Heva. Edgar the Snail. Heva was one of the most infamous members of the Aryan Brotherhood, a white supremacist prison gang known for its brutal and calculating actions. Heva's name became synonymous with the kind of cold, ruthless leadership that defined the gang's operation within the U.S. prison system. Born in the early 1960s, Heva eventually rose through the ranks of the Aryan Brotherhood, a group notorious for its violent enforcement of rules and its influence over various illicit activities. His journey through the criminal underworld was marked by his involvement in numerous criminal enterprises, all aimed at asserting the Aryan Brotherhood's dominance, both inside and outside of prison walls. Heva's reputation was built on his leadership role within the gang, where he held a position of power and influence. As a high-ranking member, he was instrumental in orchestrating various operations that furthered the Brotherhood's illegal ventures. These included controlling gambling, illicit substances, and violent actions designed to intimidate rival groups and maintain order within the gang. Heva's role wasn't just passive. He was directly involved in the planning and execution of key events that further solidified the Aryan Brotherhood's stronghold. In one of the most well-known events, Heva was convicted for his part in the violent acts that took place within California's Lompoc Penitentiary. It was here that he and fellow gang leaders, Barry the Baron Mills and Tyler the Hulk Bingham, were linked to several incidents involving intimidation and attacks aimed at ensuring the gang's control. Heva's most infamous conviction came in a major federal racketeering case that aimed to dismantle the Aryan Brotherhood's operations. The charges against him included racketeering and violent crimes in aid of racketeering, both of which pointed to his involvement in a network of criminal activities that spanned across decades. Alongside Mills and Bingham, Heva was convicted under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, a law designed to target the leadership of organized criminal groups. His conviction was linked to a series of violent events, including his role in the murder of Arva Lee Ray at Lompoc Penitentiary in 1989. During his trial, it was revealed that Heva and his co-conspirators used a complex network of communication, including secret notes passed between high-security facilities, to coordinate their efforts. Despite his attempts to defend himself, Heva was convicted, and the jury ultimately sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms. In the end, Heva, along other gang members, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 7. Dale Bretches. Dale Bretches, a known member of the Aryan Brotherhood, gained significant notoriety due to his involvement in a variety of illegal activities, particularly from within the confines of prison. His affiliation with the Aryan Brotherhood, a violent and notorious white supremacist prison gang, is well documented, and his actions throughout his life have marked him as an individual with a dangerous reputation. Bretches was incarcerated in the late 1970s after being convicted for his involvement in a deadly altercation in San Diego. By the time the 2000s came around, he had become a key figure within the Aryan Brotherhood, which has long been associated with criminal activities such as extortion, trafficking illicit substances, and orchestrating violent acts. While serving his life sentence at Pelican Bay State Prison, a high-security facility in Northern California, Bretches was involved in an underground scheme that involved the breeding of dangerous dogs, specifically the Presa Canario breed. These dogs were used in brutal attacks, and their purpose seemed to extend beyond mere aggression to potentially being used as tools for criminal enterprises. Bretches, alongside fellow Aryan Brotherhood member Paul "Cornfed" Schneider, orchestrated a dog breeding ring from within the maximum security walls of Pelican Bay. They used intermediaries, such as private citizens and attorneys, to manage the operation outside of prison. The scheme was shrouded in secrecy, utilizing code names and hidden communication to disguise the true intent of the operation. According to reports, these dogs were bred not just for aggression but possibly for use in illegal activities such as protecting illicit drug operations or for fighting. The operation reached its tragic peak when one of the dogs bred under their direction, Bane, attacked and killed a woman, Diane Whipple, in a San Francisco apartment building in January 2001. This event brought unwanted public attention to the sinister nature of Bretches' activities, linking the Aryan Brotherhood's internal operations to real-world violence. Number 6. Christopher Overton Gibson. Christopher Overton Gibson was a significant member of the notorious Aryan Brotherhood. Gibson's role within the organization, as well as his criminal activities, positioned him as one of the key players in the group's reign of violence and illicit operations behind bars. Born in 1960, Gibson became involved with the Aryan Brotherhood. Gibson's criminal involvement escalated as he ascended in rank within the gang. The Aryan Brotherhood operated with a clear structure, and members like Gibson were tasked with upholding its rules through fear and force. They were notorious for settling disputes violently, with the most extreme measures taken against those who betrayed the gang or broke its unwritten codes. Over the years, Gibson became implicated in numerous violent incidents, many of which involved the direct involvement or ordering of violent retribution against inmates who disrespected the gang or violated its rules. In 2006, Gibson faced federal charges in connection with his actions as part of a major racketeering investigation that aimed to dismantle the Aryan Brotherhood's criminal operations. Along with fellow gang leaders Barry the Baron Mills, Tyler the Hulk Bingham, and Edgar the Snail Heva, Gibson was convicted under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. This conviction stemmed from a series of violent events linked to the gang's activities, including a number of high-profile attacks on rival inmates and those seen as enemies of the Brotherhood. One key event that underscored Gibson's dangerous role within the gang was a conspiracy to incite violence in multiple facilities, including the Pennsylvania-based Lewisburg Penitentiary. The plan, which was allegedly orchestrated by Gibson and others, was to escalate racial tensions within the prison system. This culminated in the demise of several inmates. Evidence during the trial included testimonies about secretive messages passed between gang members, such as the use of invisible ink and hidden compartments in objects like peanut halves to communicate orders across long distances. These messages were often calls to action, including targeting specific individuals or provoking larger violent conflicts within the prison. Gibson's indictment also included charges related to his involvement in illicit trafficking within the prison system, including the distribution of illegal substances and weapons. The Aryan Brotherhood's influence extended far beyond the prison walls, with members like Gibson playing an instrumental role in the coordination of these operations, which helped fund the gang's activities and its power structure. In 2006, after a lengthy trial, a jury convicted Gibson and his co-defendants of several serious offenses. Number 5. Paul John Schneider. Paul John "Cornfed" Schneider, a high-ranking member of the Aryan Brotherhood, is a figure whose criminal activities and dangerous reputation have shaped much of his story. Born in 1962 in Cerritos, California, Schneider quickly became involved in criminal behavior. By the mid-1980s, his involvement in illicit activities led him to a lengthy sentence for a robbery. He was incarcerated in the California Department of Corrections, where he would later cement his place in the notorious Aryan Brotherhood, a violent prison gang. Throughout the years, Schneider's name became synonymous with some of the most violent incidents connected to the gang. One of the most chilling episodes tied to his actions was the brutal attack involving two Presa Canario dogs, Bane and Hera, which were raised under Schneider's direction from inside Pelican Bay State Prison. The dogs were eventually linked to the death of Diane Whipple, a woman in San Francisco who was attacked by Bane while entering her apartment building in 2001. This horrific event drew national attention, not only because of the tragic nature of the attack, but also due to the involvement of Schneider, who had orchestrated the breeding and training of these dogs while serving his sentence. The violence surrounding the dogs, coupled with Schneider's role, underscored his status within the gang as someone capable of masterminding operations that stretched well beyond prison walls. Schneider's time within the Aryan Brotherhood was marked by a series of criminal undertakings. He was involved in smuggling illicit substances and coordinating robberies, even from the confines of his cell. His criminal reach was vast, spanning multiple states and involving a network of associates who operated under his direction. He was particularly known for his ruthlessness and for his ability to manipulate others to carry out his orders. Schneider's involvement in the termination of Sonoma County Sheriff's Deputy Frank Trejo further solidified his reputation as a dangerous figure. During the 1995 incident, a paroled member of the Aryan Brotherhood, under Schneider's command, took the deputy's life during a robbery. Schneider's name became a symbol of fear in both the criminal underworld and among law enforcement. In fact, a former prison guard described Schneider as the most dangerous man in California. His criminal operations were carefully planned, and he maintained strict control over them, even though he was incarcerated in the highly secure Pelican Bay State Prison. Despite his criminal notoriety, Schneider's life in prison was far from stable. His decision to speak to the media about the dog attack incident led to tension within the gang, which viewed such actions as betrayal. Schneider's extensive interviews and public comments, including an in-depth Rolling Stone article that hinted at his complex and strange relationships with his lawyers, only made matters worse. In retaliation for his media engagement, gang members marked him for death, a fate that many inmates in similar positions have faced. His criminal history culminated in multiple life sentences. In 2001, Schneider was sentenced to a third life term for his role in the drug smuggling operation and the demise of Deputy Trejo. Authorities made special arrangements for his sentencing to protect him from potential harm by gang members. His request for safety led to his transfer to federal custody, where he remains today, isolated from the reach of the Aryan Brotherhood. Number 4. Thomas Silverstein. Thomas Edward Silverstein, known in prison circles as Terrible Tom, was one of the most infamous figures in the U.S. correctional system. His name synonymous with violence, chaos, and unrelenting defiance. Born on February 4, 1952, in Long Beach, California, Silverstein's early life was marked by a series of difficult circumstances. Raised in a troubled home where bullying was a constant threat, he was taught from an early age by his mother to retaliate forcefully against any aggression. This hardened mindset would later define his behavior throughout his criminal career. By the time he was 19, Silverstein had already found himself in a prison for an armed robbery conviction, marking the beginning of a long, violent journey through the U.S. penitentiary system. Silverstein's involvement with the Aryan Brotherhood, a notorious white supremacist prison gang, began while he was incarcerated at Leavenworth. His ties to this group would later cement his reputation as a ruthless and calculating figure within the prison network. In 1980, he was convicted for the demise of an inmate named Danny Atwell. The manslaughter was said to be in retaliation for Atwell's refusal to cooperate with drug trafficking within the facility. However, this conviction was overturned in 1985 due to evidence that key witnesses had lied in court. Regardless, Silverstein's involvement in prison violence continued to escalate. The turning point in Silverstein's criminal career came in 1983 at the United States Penitentiary, Marion, in Illinois. After being transferred there, Silverstein was placed in the Control Unit, a section of the prison reserved for prisoners deemed particularly dangerous. It was here that Silverstein's brutal actions would leave a permanent mark on the history of the U.S. prison system. In October 1983, Silverstein orchestrated the violent attack on correctional officer Merle Klutz, stabbing him multiple times in what Silverstein claimed was an act of retribution for Klutz's alleged harassment. This act of violence led to a lockdown at USP Marion, one that would last over 2 decades. It also resulted in Silverstein being placed in solitary confinement for the rest of his life. Number 2. William Sylvester. William Sylvester is a notorious figure within the Aryan Brotherhood, one of the most dangerous and violent prison-based gangs in the United States. His criminal activities span over decades, marked by his leadership role within the gang and his involvement in a range of illicit enterprises. Known for his ability to direct operations from behind bars, Sylvester became infamous for his control over a vast network of criminal activities, including narcotic trafficking, violent acts, and manipulation of other inmates. Sylvester, born in 1965, was serving time for a serious crime before his rise in the gang's ranks. By the time law enforcement began investigating his activities, he had already established himself as a key member of the AB, overseeing operations within California's most secure correctional facilities. Alongside fellow inmate Ronald Yandel, Sylvester was responsible for orchestrating an extensive network for the distribution of illicit substances, primarily heroin and methamphetamine, smuggled into prisons and distributed to areas across California and beyond. Sylvester's role in this group was one of power and control. He used smuggled cell phones to communicate with associates outside of prison, giving orders and overseeing operations from his cell. He is directly linked to the demise of an inmate at Folsom State Prison on October 7, 2011. Sylvester, under the influence of the AB, played a central role in executing violent directives, including a plot carried out by his associates to target rival gang members. In 2019, federal authorities charged Sylvester and other members of the gang with racketeering and additional violent crimes. He, along with other high-ranking AB members, was indicted for his involvement in multiple violent acts and the continued management of narcotic operations. This indictment included new charges that could potentially carry the demise penalty, reflecting the severity of his crimes. The operation that led to Sylvester's eventual indictment also revealed the deep connections within the gang, including collaboration with other criminal organizations. His ability to maintain such control while behind bars demonstrated his dangerous leadership and the reach of the Aryan Brotherhood's influence. As of the most recent developments in the case, Sylvester remains incarcerated. Number 1. Barry Byron Mills. Barry Byron Mills, known as the Baron, was a notorious figure in the criminal world, particularly for his role as a leader of the Aryan Brotherhood. Born on July 7, 1948 in Windsor, California, Mills's life was marked by violence, criminal activity, and a rise to power within the Brotherhood that lasted for decades. His journey into the criminal underworld began at a young age when, in 1967, he was first incarcerated. By 1969, after being convicted of an armed robbery, Mills entered the California state prison system, where he would spend much of his life and build a reputation that would span across the nation's prison systems. Mills, who quickly aligned himself with the Brotherhood, rose through the ranks due to his violent and strategic approach to expanding the gang's power. In the 1970s and 1980s, he became a key figure within the gang, securing a position on a 3-member federal commission that controlled operations across the federal and state prison systems. Under his leadership, the Brotherhood's influence reached beyond prison walls, spreading to street-level operations and even involving high-profile criminal figures from various walks of life. Mills's reputation as a ruthless leader was cemented through numerous violent events orchestrated from behind bars. One of the most infamous incidents involved an attack on a fellow inmate in 1979 at USP Atlanta, where Mills was accused of nearly decapitating the individual over a gambling debt. He also played a key role in consolidating the Aryan Brotherhood's control over federal prisons by initiating and fueling conflicts with rival groups, such as the DC Blacks, and ordering violent retaliation against those who disrespected or challenged the Brotherhood's authority. Mills also helped expand the gang's criminal activities beyond prison borders. Along with his close associate Tyler Bingham, Mills was instrumental in orchestrating narcotic trafficking operations, including the distribution of illicit substances and facilitating other criminal schemes. His control over the gang allowed him to direct operations from within the confines of prison walls, using couriers and coded messages to carry out his orders. The U.S. government took significant steps to dismantle the Aryan Brotherhood, culminating in a massive 2002 racketeering indictment. Mills and several top members were charged with a range of crimes, including conspiracy, illegal trafficking, and involvement in multiple violent acts. In 2006, after a lengthy trial, Mills and Bingham were convicted of their roles in a series of violent crimes. Despite the government's attempt to seek the death penalty, Mills and Bingham were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Mills was sent to the ADX Florence, a maximum security federal penitentiary in Colorado, where he would spend the remainder of his life. Mills's time at ADX Florence was marked by his continued influence over the Aryan Brotherhood, even as he served his sentences. In 2018, Mills died at the age of 70.